For this module, I'd like you to think about what you are currently doing or want to do in terms of fitness planning. First of all, we need to identify the difference between what it means to be physically active versus what does it mean to exercise. Physical activity means that you are moving, you're not sitting a lot, you're up and you're getting up every hour and taking a little bit of a walk, maybe very low intensity type of activities. And exercise is structured, planned, and typically has a greater level of intensity. When we think about exercise, we're looking at improving our fitness and also ultimately our health and wellness. The guidelines on what we should be focused on achieving is approximately 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity each week. The components of fitness are 5: cardiorespiratory endurance, muscular strength, flexibility, and body composition. For aerobic activity, we're looking at least 150 minutes per week, and this is from the physical activity guidelines that have been identified through numerous scientific studies and well-respected organizations. And the goal is 150 minutes of moderate activity. It can be cycling, swimming, playing an activity. We also can look at, if it's a lower intensity, we can look at gardening and walking our dog, for example. For muscular strengthening activity, the goal is for about 2 days a week. And these types of activities can be done either using your body weight or going to a gym and using strength training machines, free weights, and also I can't forget to say utilizing exercise bands, for example. There's a relationship between the intensity or difficulty of an activity to volume and frequency. And lower intensity exercise is the type of activity where you need more volume more often, but you also will have a lower level of intensity. So if we look at volume and frequency as the y-axis, intensity as the x-axis, as intensity increases, the amount of volume and frequency goes down. So that's where you get that 75 minutes of vigorous exercise or 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. And that's where we have some flexibility in terms of how we meet our guidelines of how we should move. Another way of looking at the comparison between moderate intensity and high intensity activities is to look at the time, compare the activities, which is in the first column, to the duration that it takes to burn the same number of calories. So washing and waxing a car would take 45 to 60 minutes to burn the same number of calories as running a 10-minute mile, for example. So we see that more lower intensity or moderate intensity activities take more time. Vigorous intensity activities, we need to engage in those for less time to get the same kind of benefit. One of the ways that we determine if we're getting what the intensity of exercise is by looking at what our cardiorespiratory, how our heart is responding to that exercise. And you know intuitively that if you're walking along a flat plane, your heart rate is going to be lower than if you walk up a hill because it's more intense to walk up a hill or up a flight of stairs than it is to walk on a flat place. So the way that we identify our training range for cardiovascular benefit is to meet a threshold of about 60% of our estimated maximum. and up to about 80%, and that's where we can get some training benefits in terms of cardiovascular benefits. And hopefully you've had a chance to calculate that in your activity if you're doing a cardiovascular activity for your choice. Here are some examples of moderate intensity activities for cardiorespiratory benefit, and that could be walking, yard work, tennis. So know that we are going to look at more duration for these types of activities to be able to get what the goals are for the recommendations for a healthy life. If we compare this to our vigorous intensity activities, these types of activities, which would be swimming laps, playing a vigorous tennis game of singles where you have to move around the court more, if you're outside digging in the dirt, if you are doing HIIT training or high intensity interval training, if you're doing the F45 or a group exercise, or you're riding a bike quickly, not a leisurely bike, but you're out riding quickly, those are going to be your vigorous intensity activities. So we have to meet our guidelines, we need to do about 75 minutes of that per week. Muscle strengthening or muscle endurance types of activities are designed or recommended for us to do 2 to 3 days per week. And there's really not one way of doing strength training. Now, we do offer an introductory and an intermediate strength training courses, and you learn different things in each one of those courses. But if you are trying to build strength, you're going to lift heavier weights, fewer repetitions, maybe more sets. If you're trying to build muscle endurance, you're going to do more repetitions and lighter weight. And no matter what, if you are doing muscle endurance, lower weight, high repetitions, you're still going to get stronger. But if you want to focus on strength, you're going to do higher weight, fewer repetition activities. And so what we know is that there's a lot of tweaking to do with muscular strengthening activities, but we're always going to get some endurance and some strength when we do weight training. We can do weight training at the gym by using free weights, machines, racks, dumbbells. We can also use the equipment, which focuses on one joint typically and one muscle group typically. You can also use body weight. Example would be doing push-ups. And you can also use bands where you're doing something against a resistance. So there's multiple ways of doing strengthening activity. So I've looked at cardiorespiratory activity, muscular strength and endurance activities, and here we have flexibility. Flexibility is needed for all movements in life. Now, flexibility activities cannot count toward your cardiorespiratory 75 or 150 minutes or your strength training 2 days a week. Flexibility is on its own, and it is something that ideally, if we do it 5 to 7 days per week, it's great. But ideally, we would like to do it, well, that's ideally. If we're doing it after our exercise sessions, we're on a good place. When we have nice, flexible, supple muscles, tendons, and joints, we are going to be able to move more easily, keep our joints healthy, and be able to do many activities as simple as picking something up off the floor. With each exercise session, we always want to have a gradual warm up and a gradual cool down. So this is typically a 2 to 5 minute change in starting a little bit more slowly and then increasing the intensity or effort. We have a change in heart rate and body temperature. And when I say body temperature, I mean in terms of you'll start to perspire a little bit, your joints and muscles will warm up. At the end of exercise, we want to cool down. That's really the important time with allowing our heart rate to slow down gradually, 2 to 5 minutes for the general population. For strength training, you can warm up by something cardiovascular like pedaling on a bike or something along taking an easy jog. But most of the time before you start your lifting, you lift lighter weights as a warm up and then you move into a stronger or a heavier weight for your workout. And here, looks like I used this one twice. I really want to make sure that you know the number of minutes to burn 150 kilocalories or 150 calories of energy comparison. Remember, the lower, the less vigorous, the more time it takes. The more vigorous, the less time that it takes. And here's an example of a 20-year-old woman of what she can do in terms of living on campus and being physically active. So what she realized, this particular Madison, she found that physical activity helped her. She realized she was getting pretty sedentary. When she was more active, she felt less anxious. She could productively study better. And so she made the commitment to get at least here 420 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise each week. So that's much more than what the recommended amount of 150 minutes is. So she's got, and then also 2 days of strengthening. So here she walks briskly to class, to the gym, to the dining hall, her dorms, instead of taking a shuttle. She's walking much more. She increased her walking, and then that allowed her to get to the gym to be able to do her specific exercise components. So she's counting her movement throughout the day as part of her fitness regimen. When you put your plan together, you want to plan for your goal, you want to be regular, and you want to make sure that you start slowly to get into shape gradually. We often want to start right off the bat 5 days a week instead of starting 2 to 3 days per week, starting at a lower level of intensity and allowing for that introduction for those small changes and acclimation to exercise to allow us to not be stiff, sore, uncomfortable, and also to want to continue on. This is an example of what you can do for walking if you're walking programmed. So you start 3 to 4 days a week for 15 minutes. Now that might not sound like a lot, but that is, if somebody's been sedentary, that's more than what they've been doing. So a 15-minute walk 3 days a week is a great starting point. Then you start to increase, and here you'll see that moderate walking, the time is increased, and brisk walking, then you increase the intensity, and then you add hills. So there's a general or a gentle way of increasing first your duration and then increasing the frequency. So when you're starting to exercise, you want to allow some time for your mind to get used to it. I know I had surgery on my shoulder and I couldn't do much. And so when I started to exercise again, I had to kind of get accustomed to, all right, time to get going. This is good for me. Get your mind ready so you're ready to go and have some patience with yourself. Make sure that you fuel your body with sufficient calories. You want to make sure that you also have enough water. Um, Drinking fluids, drinking water especially is important unless you're doing something over 90 minutes, then if a sports drink or something can be beneficial. Make sure what you're doing is fun And it's always great to track your progress because you can see how far you've come. It's similar to the behavior change project that you're working on. And also keep everything in perspective. Recognize how you feel when you're exercising, what it does for you, but know that if you do need to take a day off because you're not well, that is a-okay. It's not a problem to miss a day. You can get back up on that plan the next day.